How is it up there?
Unseasonably warm. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Minnesota, it's gonna be like in the mid 50s tomorrow, which is crazy.
Yeah, it was like
So,
71 here today, but last week it was below freezing, so we're kind of all over the place. So
hmm
we've swapped weather.
yeah. We
So
had those negative temps too, but
yeah, have you had a
a
lot of
few weeks
snow?
ago, but
A
no.
lot of snow? No, really?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
watching the weather up there, just trying to keep track of everything since I came back down here, and it seems like you guys have been warmer than normal.
it's been a very mild winter. Is it like an El Nino or something?
Yeah,
So, yeah, we
the
had 110 inches of total snowfall last winter, and we've had like a handful this year. So I'm like, I'll take it because last
yeah.
year was rough.
Yeah.
So
I think I was getting all the snow and you guys are getting getting none of it, so that's all
yeah.
right. So the framework I've been going with on this is just pretty loose. I've got about 6 set questions and it's just pretty open-ended, which I think is pretty organic. Um, so I said in your intro, which you'll hear when this comes out, is like you're my oldest literary friend almost. Like we've been through this since day one. So this will be kind of a pull back the curtain on the MFA experience a little bit and just kind of really focus on you and what you do. So the question I've started with everybody is, what's your background in your life and your writing? How did you get started doing this crazy thing that we do?
Yeah, so I'll start with writing. I was just one of those kids who loved to write little stories. So there wasn't like a light bulb moment. It was one of those things that's kind of always been a part of me. I loved horses in the 90s. So I was one of those horse girls. So I wrote little stories about girls and horses, and that evolved and kind of took root and eventually led me to a shout out a high school creative writing class where I was really kind of trying some of these things for the first time and getting like feedback from a teacher, and just had the most dynamic, incredible teacher possible who really said some powerful, encouraging things that, like, had she not, I don't know if I would be here today. So shout out to her. She's still on Facebook. Otto, I love you. Um, but just that testament of, like, that encouragement and what it does mean to, I think, any artist, any creative. um, and then from there decided really wanted to pursue it in my undergrad. So did the crazy thing in a global recession studying art,
Hmm.
and specifically this writing degree that was 50% creative, 50% professional writing. I definitely chose it for the creative avenues and classes, and of course I ended up getting a job afterwards in the professional writing. So baby Kaleigh is glad, she could eat.
Yeah.
Um, ended up working for nonprofits. I worked for the Salvation Army for 8 years and was doing grant writing. So kind of found my foot in there and then was able to use that writing skill to kind of bring about some good in the world, and it's kind of led into this overall path of nonprofit fundraising. So that's kind of my background in life as well, the career, the 9 to 5, um, and how kind of that passion for writing kind of fueled, at least for now, this career path for me.
Yeah. I did the opposite. I started with the creative and I ended up through the tornado in the communications field. So that was whiplash. I thought I was great, like everything was going well, and then you get into professional writing. That's a different animal altogether. So you it's two sides of the same coin, really.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, it's good to be involved in a job where you can write. But I think sometimes if you are creative, that kind of takes away from your creative side. You get so consumed with the other that sometimes it can pull you out of what your first love is. So that's kind of the obstacle I found with it. But it is a job in writing, and those are hard to come by. So yeah.
For yeah, at least the start of my career, it was
Hmm.
a good learning experience. I've transitioned away from that professional writing and now do more individual fundraising. So working
Hmm.
with individual donors, there's still some writing involved, but it's a lot more minimal. And I made that change just because I was kind of burning out with some of the professional writing. So
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
I did much the same as you. I started out when we were in the fourth grade. Our grade school started this thing called the Cardinal Quill Competition, where each fourth grade class, the students had to write a novel over the space of 9 weeks, and then the winning one would get published in a little, like it was printed on the old printers, with a little green and white lines.
Oh,
And
did you have to, like, peel off the edges? Was it one of those?
oh yeah, you had to peel off the edges, and then they printed it out and they put it in like one of those Kinko's spiral bound flip flip
Yeah.
things, and you had to illustrate it yourself. But I straight ripped off Twin Peaks as a fourth grader. Like, it was like this anamorphic. It was like Wilbur Mosquito was the detective that was trying to solve the mystery of who killed Laura Gerbil. So but it ended up winning. Like, I won like the Cardinal Quill Award, and I think that kind of lit the fire for me too.
Mhm,
And if it wouldn't have been for that program, I don't know that I would have ever started doing creative writing. And then I went into a lull. I started writing songs and playing music, and then when that burned out, I didn't write anything for a long time until my
mhm,
wife was like, "You should really, put this to work and start writing some stories," which I didn't do. I didn't take that advice. I started writing the novel.
mhm,
So I jumped right in. And yeah, that's the novel you read. So, I mean, it's like
mhm.
you start with that and then you take it to school and you polish it up and it becomes whatever it's become. So, y- yeah, I think everybody comes from different places. It's been really interesting talking to the people that I've talked to so far of where they started and what kind of spurs that on. But I know you've got support with your folks and your writing, and your partner and everybody like really supported you along the way. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people take for granted. It helps you because sometimes you can get stuck because it's kind of a lonely existence if you don't have people reading it and giving you some feedback saying, "Hey, this is good," or "Hey, this is crap."
Absolutely. Yeah. Very, very
More
blessed.
more
Mhm.
so the crap part because everybody thinks it's brilliant, right?
Yeah, finding those people who will tell you the truth is hard.
Yeah. So we never really touched on this together in class, and that's kind of why I'm excited to have you here, because probably I would say out of all of us, we're probably the closest. We were in every
Mhm,
class together and emailed and been on Zooms, and we kind of bonded more than anybody else. So
mhm,
our process, I think, is what's going to be interesting. Like mine, I've talked on here before about my exorcism writing, and we talked about that
mhm.
in class, how you had to get something out. But I never really asked you what you do and how you do it, because you're two things in one. Like, you do poetry and you do fiction. So, one, I guess, is the process different? And two, what is your process? How do you go about it?
The short answer is slowly. Um, I am not a fast writer. I think I've been searching for my process for a long time. I feel like I have some of that, thankfully, from the program that I'm desperately trying to hold on to now that we don't have accountability. Um, but I tend to see what I'm writing, prose wise. So we'll start with fiction because it is a little different for poetry. The prose, I kind of see it like as a movie. Like I can see these things in my head. I think you do too, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very visceral, like you're imagining your characters in these scenes. And yeah, sometimes my characters surprise me, like the things that they say or the reactions they have. And I'm like, oh, I didn't plan for that. This is cool. Let's go here. But a lot of the time, I'm kind of sitting there in that moment and just trying to be that transcriber. Like I'm trying to get everything in my head out into the page. And so it's very slow, because I'm thinking through, like, sometimes even, like, human movements, and if you see me in a coffee shop, sometimes I'm, like, moving my hands and things, like, to try to, like, get in my body. If I'm like, "Well, if you're really anxious, like, how," and I'm like, all of a sudden in a coffee shop, I start, like, hunching a little bit, and I'm like, "Okay,
Mhm.
you're you look crazy," but you try to, like, embody what that feels like, but it means that I'm moving very, very slowly through my sentences. Um I started, probably in, like, the middle of the program, trying to get up early in the mornings,
Mhm.
and get some time in, finding you just never know how you're gonna be at the end of the day, what's gonna come up. So trying to give my best energy to my creative work, 'cause at the end of the day, I'm spent. Um, there's very little left of that energy well to create.
Mhm.
So I started getting up early, and it was not perfect. It wasn't every day because I am a night owl. I could still sleep 10 hours every night. I hate getting up. I'm in my mid 30s and I never got that like adult gene where they're like, you just get up with the sun. I'm like, says who? So I have to work at like getting up. And again, it's not perfect, but it allowed at least enough of that chunk. Sometimes I was able to write a couple of pages every morning. Sometimes it was just like 3 sentences. Like it really took an hour to kind of get into the rhythm and then see what I'm seeing, transcribe it, and then, you have to go get ready for work.
Mhm.
Um, but it's something. So yeah, so it's very slow. It tends to be very detailed. All those you've seen my work, very lyrical, a lot of description. Um, a lot of that is actually coming through on the first draft. I would say the majority of it. Certainly, sometimes I go back and fix or realize things were uneven, but a lot of that is just how I'm kind of experiencing the writing. So very slow. And then poetry. My poetry tends to be pretty autobiographical. So I'm digging from memories and experiences. And so there are some poems I'm submitting right now that I wrote the first draft of in 2017. So I've been
Mhm.
like working on them, coming back every year, even. Like I let them sit for 12 months between edits and I come back and I'm like, okay, what is this saying now? So it's just much, much slower. And I have a harder time, I think, finding the end of the poem, like the final draft, I should say, not the
Yeah.
closing poem.
Your sentences are so different than mine. We're probably on opposite ends of the spectrum there.
Mhm,
Mine are short and sharp and not a lot of detail. And that's not so much a choice. I think it's just the story I'm telling kind of lends
mhm,
itself to that. But yours, um, so I, there's different types of writing. Some of it can be so purple and so florid that you can't read it, right?
mhm,
Like it almost like somebody's trying too hard. I think we've
mm,
all read stuff like that where you're just like, oh God, another adjective. Yours is not that way. Yours has a sing songiness to it where it like carries the style of the sentence carries the narrative to me when I read it. And I don't
mm,
feel like you're trying too hard. I think it's the poetry bleeding over into the prose, which is a talent that I don't have because I'm not a great poet. Um, but I enjoy that because I don't enjoy books that are the other way. Like I do
mhm,
love Faulkner. I like to read books with long sentences that are overly descriptive, but I think you can lose the normal reader that way. Whereas your book, which we'll talk about later, doesn't do that. It does all those things, but the story's so good that it carries the story, right?
mhm,
So I think that's a talent that one, there's always that thing, can you teach somebody to write?
mhm.
Um, well, one, before we go on with it, do you think you can teach somebody to write?
I think if you're willing to learn, probably, um, like and that means you have to learn how to take criticism, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but in theory, I think you're right. But I also have the belief that there is some innate talent. Maybe not in everyone, but it is a fact. I mean, I could practice painting, I think, for the rest of my life, and I don't think I could get to like the level where some like incredible,
Hmm.
impressionists or like this like visceral reaction that they have been able to draw in, Monet, Kandinsky, these folks. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle, but I guess I have to believe that if you care about it enough and you're willing to learn, you can be
Yeah.
a sponge and take things in and produce something beautiful. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you can. I mean, here's where I'm at. I had a group of kids pre-tornado. I was teaching a little workshop
Mhm,
to junior high kids, and we had no idea if the kids could write or not. They just had done well on their writing portions of their Aspire test, and their English teachers were like, "We're going to nominate these kids to go with you and be a part of this workshop." And they had basically been taught to write an essay, just an
mhm,
expository essay, but once I got them in there with just very little guidance, they were producing stuff that was far and above what we all thought they could do. So I think, like you say, inherently in somebody, there is a talent for writing
mhm,
where you can shine that diamond up. But I'm also on the thing where, yeah, I can't paint to save my life. I can paint a house, but that's about it. I'm not gonna be able to
Mhm,
paint any kind of art. I'm not gonna be able to carve or sculpt anything. I think if you take somebody from that level, I think you can only get them so far. You know, it's kind of like singing.
mhm,
You can be a great musician, but you be a crap singer, you
mhm,
know? So I think that's where I'm at. That's where I kind of stand with that. Can you teach people the tools? Can you give them all the tools of the craft? Yes. But I don't know that you can teach them to create something that's beautiful. Right. And
mhm,
I'm not saying there's bad, well, I am saying there's bad writing, but
mhm.
it's not all beautiful, if you know what I mean. You can take something
Yeah.
that's stark and it can be beautiful, or you can take something like you do and it can be beautiful, right? So I just don't know. But back to back to the way you do it, you're the thing that I was saying earlier with your sentences, they're beautiful sentences. They're not long sentences. It's the way that I think you craft the words in the sentence that makes it
Mhm,
that makes it readable for somebody that doesn't really read your genre. And I'll put my hand up and say I was not one, right? Like
mhm,
we had, I don't know about you, but there were four people in our group that I was excited to get their stuff.
mhm,
And the thing was, I wouldn't have really read any of that without being in the program with you guys, because it was neat to see how you did it. Like,
mhm,
because you had to tell everybody, this is my plan. This is what I'm going through. This is what I'm trying to put on the page. And then when that clicks and you can see the craft and you can see the story, then I think that makes it much easier for people. It draws people in. So
mhm.
if you can draw people in that don't read what you do, that's a true talent. So um, your book does that. So we're going to talk about it later because I got lots of
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
But and you can tell me or you can not tell me because we don't want to spoil the book. But
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to ask anything about that.
Okay.
But yeah, kudos to you for that, because I think, like you said, your skills as a poet go into your skills as a prose writer, and that's something I don't have, and that's admirable. So whoever taught you how to
Thank
do
you.
that, you should high five them one day. So we touched on, let's just jump right into what school's like, right? So
Mhm,
you and I both came different backgrounds. We both went in the same program. Um, from everybody I've talked to, the experience is pretty much the same. It's this raw, I'm putting everything out there for people that I have no idea who they are to read. And then for a week, and tell me if I'm really putting this out of context. This is just
mhm,
how I felt about it. For a week, you just catch crap from people, and you have to sit there and you're like, God, that's not what I meant. That's not what I'm trying to say. Why can't this person understand what I'm trying to do here?
mhm,
But in ours and in a lot of them, you're not really allowed to speak back. You can't
mhm,
really clarify. Now, I talked to Colin Brightwell in the last episode, and he was at Ole Miss, and he said they could speak up a little bit and say, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do." But for the most part, it's a pretty jarring experience to put yourself out there and just have people more or less pick it apart. So,
mhm.
How did you deal with that?
Oh, I've been training for that since I was 17. Um, I I took a creative writing class, a different one than the first one I mentioned,
Hmm.
while I was in high school, but it was a community college class. Um, so yep, PSEO. I know a lot of states have that. And I was the youngest in the class. I was 17 years old, surrounded by mostly adults in their early 20s. And it was my first experience of like being absolutely ripped apart, but like in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
um, just these adults saying these terrible things to me. And they weren't wrong. The story was bad, but it was that like budding writer that needed encouragement and probably some gentle correction at that age. And I actually had a friend I was in the class with. She was in high school too, and she kind of pulled me aside after that and was like, "Are you sure that you want to like pursue this? Are you sure that you want to major in this?" Because at that point, I was planning on following what I did, which is go into writing, and it was actually more hurtful that even my friend didn't believe in me. um, And she, I think, truly meant well. She was like, "College is a lot of money. Like, are you sure this is the degree you wanna do?" And I don't know why, I'm so grateful I didn't listen. I actually went back to that teacher and the high school teacher and was like, "Are you sure I can do this?" And she encouraged me again, and, um, I'm so glad I did listen to, like, that pull inside me because shocker, like, my writing's improved since I was 17, go figure. I was taught how to write then in college, and so having that, like, kind of just this very first visceral experience, building on it in my undergrad where we had this room of people critiquing us, and there were, boundaries, things in tone, um, but we weren't really allowed to respond either.
Mhm.
I think at the very end, you could ask clarifying questions like, what made you say this or what made you think this about the piece? Where did you get that from? And so you could learn in edits of maybe did I go astray in thinking something was clear and it really wasn't. But you couldn't defend yourself. You could just ask a couple questions.
Mhm.
So all that kind of prepared me for, I think, going into this experience of knowing folks are just going to interpret things correctly or incorrectly, either because it just I wasn't clear enough, or sometimes, I mean, I think there was just folks not reading closely enough because it is homework and we're
Mhm.
all adults and
Mhm.
full-time jobs, so we can get into that and the uniqueness of Concordia's program. But yeah, I guess I'm rambling, but just it took time and it took maybe some early heartbreak just to know what I was getting into and have that tough skin. Like the skin's gotten tough over the years.
Yeah. How much, I mean, I know because I've read it, but how much of the critique did you use?
Not a whole lot. I always paid closer attention to our professors.
Yeah.
Um, I looked for themes. Like if something showed up a few times, I paid attention to it.
Mhm.
I guess I'll be honest, if it was a one-off and I disagreed, I just let that feedback go.
Yeah. I find that every program really, certain people key on certain things, and that's gonna be the thing they pick up on time and time again, and I'm not saying that's lazy. I'm just saying that, you know, spelling and grammar, if that's your critique every single time and you don't ever say anything about characterization or theme or the
Mhm,
overall movement of the plot, then I'm kind of like you. I'll just take it with a grain of salt and go on because everybody has a comma splice. Everybody misses a quotation mark. I can live with that. But what you do value is kind of what you were saying with the adults when you were a kid. Like you value the stuff that's constructive that you didn't see because I think by the time you get to that point to where you decide, okay, I'm going to get a terminal degree in this, you've probably read your writing so much that you don't see the things that you do need to see. That was my biggest
mhm,
problem with my stuff. I'd read it to the point to where I was convinced it was perfect, and then you let somebody else read it and you're like, "Oh
mhm,
gosh, I didn't think about that."
mhm,
And what was valuable for me was there were not a lot of men in our program. And
mhm,
my book has female characters in it that I wanted to make sure were authentic and they
mhm,
acted the way that I perceived that a woman would react in those. And that was super valuable to have people say, I buy that. And what made me kind of feel good was you guys would say, no, I believe that. That's pretty authentic. So, I mean, that stuff, when you're going into it, that's where I think it can be helpful because it does highlight the stuff that you don't know,
mhm,
but it also highlights the stuff that you think you know, and you're just missing through, your 100th edit of whatever it is. And our professors I'm like you, I took more on board from what the professors said, probably. But I think what you do, and I think what you did too, is you identify early on, these are the people that get this. And I'm going to
mhm,
put really more stock in what they're saying than because in ours, we would have mixed cohort. You would get some people that
mhm,
would read like half your stuff. And then if you were lucky enough, you'd get two or three people that would go through the whole thing. Because the other thing that I want people to understand about our program was it was novel based,
mhm,
right? So a lot of MFAs are focused on the short story and the craft of the short story. So watching something grow from a nubbin of something into something, book length was pretty cool because you could see the character growth, you could see the plot move, and having that small little cadre of people that could correct you and help you was a big deal. So that was helpful to me. And I
Mhm.
know I know from watching the other people, the way that some of the stories changed, that it had to be helpful for them because some of our classmates started over.
Yeah,
You know, did McKenna start hers over? I think,
I
or
think so.
she changed something
It
about it
changed
because
quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah, because I remember it starting, with the house on the hill, the first one, and then it kind of
Yes.
switched, and I was like, oh girl, like you do that, but I don't know that I could do that. So it takes and I'm not saying there wasn't anything wrong with her first draft. Like I loved that
Mm-mm.
story from the start, but I think it
Mhm.
makes people realize, okay, I think the plot would move better if I did this. And I think that's a valuable thing that you learn in the MFA as opposed to doing it yourself. Because if you didn't have that cohort of people and strong professors to say, okay, this needs to happen here and this needs to happen here, you could produce something that's a little janky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I mean that was for me. But I don't know how you feel about that. But I thought it really helped us craft the whole more so than the parts.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. It was kind of a conundrum for me because you had to keep moving forward at a pretty quick pace,
Hmm.
um, while also considering these just, like, sometimes massive changes to your novel.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess my theory was you do the best you can in the time you have in this program, and you kinda hold on to those bigger criticisms when you have the time to address them too.
So
Um
how
Mhm.
much of your novel was finished when you started?
When I started the program,
Hmm.
none of it. I started at the start of the program.
So you started from scratch.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right. Here's some inside baseball. Mine was completely finished. So
Okay.
I had to go back to the start and
Uh-huh.
then start it over almost. Like, so what I
Mhm.
would do is I would submit these chapters. I would feel like they were, good enough to be submitted. And then it was interesting to see what people would find. And then I would go back and I would edit and craft it with the issues that people found. So I always wanted to ask because yours is so well constructed and plotted out that I thought maybe you had it pretty well done before you started. So you wrote that week to week?
Mostly semester to semester.
Yeah.
I really struggled to write creatively during our literature-based classes.
Yeah, those were
Um,
tough.
yeah. I enjoyed the classes actually.
Hmm.
We can talk about that too, but, like, it was hard to just switch my brain,
Yeah.
from, like, academic assignments to creative writing, because it was essentially extra work you were giving yourself on top of the weekly
Yeah.
grind.
Yeah.
So yeah, really just over what, 6 semesters. Nope, that's the whole program. No, is it? Sorry, 6 classes.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Fix that out. But, yes, over the 6 classes, half a semester's worth each. That's when I wrote this.
Yeah. That's impressive. I thought you had it with kind of at least halfway done or kind of as a whole. I couldn't do that either. I'm glad you said that because here's the thing about the workshop.
Mhm.
You're in the workshop and you're working and you're putting out good work, and then you're taking your poetry class, or then you're taking your intro to creative nonfiction class, or you're taking the research and writing about literature class, and there's no writing. Like
Mhm.
you're in there, especially with the literature the research and writing about literature. That class consumed a lot of time,
Mhm.
as did our creative writing class, because there were so many books.
Yep.
Not sorry, creative nonfiction instead of creative writing. And if that's not what you're geared for, I could see how that could pull you out. I was lucky
Mhm.
enough to have a history undergrad, so the CNF class wasn't too bad. But
Mhm.
man, the switch from fiction to nonfiction that was probably the hardest class I think I took, was that class.
Okay.
It's just out of your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That and poetry. Like I was not great. I think the best thing I produced in that class was the what splendid little starlings, or
Yeah.
whatever that poem
Oh,
was.
I loved that class.
So it was a
But
good class. I,
I like
I,
poetry, so
I'm glad that it was what's the word I'm looking for? It was like rock and roll poetry. It
Mhm.
was just you do you and produce something, and if it's good, it's good. And I thought I was really impressed with how good the people in our program were at poetry, because
Mhm.
I wasn't expecting myself to produce anything that was halfway decent. You, on the other hand, just made us all look stupid.
No,
So,
I was just having fun. Um,
so,
that was
so
the one
let
thing I missed about the creative nonfiction class is I wish we could have had one of those assignments every week be a creative nonfiction assignment to like practice
yeah.
that too. Because I enjoyed that. I had both of those classes and types of writing in my undergrad, and
Mhm.
I'm probably the weakest in creative nonfiction, but I think it's beautiful when done right. And so I was like, oh, I wish we could itch this, like scratch a little bit.
Yeah, it ended up being more a critique class,
Mhm,
really,
mhm.
than anything else.
Yeah,
So there were a lot of books in that class. So let's talk about books for a minute because
sure.
influences in books. So
Mhm.
who influenced you the most? It can be a poet, it can be prose, and then what was the one book that really inspired you to be a writer? I got asked this yesterday. I had a hard time thinking of the book.
It's a hard one. Influences are hard for me. I've been thinking about that ever since I knew I was going to be on your podcast, and I feel
Mhm,
like I don't have a great answer. But I'm just an avid reader. I always have been, and I feel like there are multiple readers inside of me that I have to feed. So by that I mean, certainly there's the reader who loves reading just these beautiful stories that like teach me something about the world or ask questions that I hadn't thought about before and things that are just really inspiring and kind of like expand the mind. And then there's the reader who just wants to be challenged or learn. And then there's one who just wants to be entertained.
mhm,
She wins most of the time. So I mean, I grew up reading books that like everyone else did and that I loved. I mean, I absolutely adore Harry Potter. Those books like really opened up a world for me when I was a kid. Like a lot of people. I mean, I read Twilight. I got on that train, went out for a while. Like it was
mhm, mhm.
fun. Um, and I think all of those things together kind of brought me to like the person and the reader I am. It all kind of belongs. And I'm kind of going off script now, but and
No,
I
that's
guess I
fine.
can go more into that, but I don't know. I think you
This
can
whole
learn.
thing's off script, so it
Okay.
doesn't matter.
I I don't know. I think you learn a lot when you read books that maybe aren't all the same thing all the time.
Mhm,
Because I don't think there's any wrong genre. I think you actually learn a lot when you expand your library and expand your thinking. And so I think I even said this at one point in the program, but I'm like, if you're struggling with plot, read like all of these big series that are out now. Read a mystery if you want to learn how to like sprinkle breadcrumbs and how you do red herrings. Certainly read something literary if you're trying to work on character. I mean, there's so much out there that I think you can learn from or learn what not to do. Like, why don't you like a style of writing? What makes this book bad in your eyes? You learn that way too. Twilight isn't
mhm.
good writing, but what did
Right.
I enjoy about it? And 18-year-old Kaleigh really loved the romance about it.
Mhm.
Can I use that now? I don't know, but at least I know that about myself and what I'm looking for in a book, or at least occasionally as a reader in books. So lately, I guess recently, I've been really inspired by books that just have this like emotional weight and like toll on me. Like if I cry, if I want to hug your book afterwards and like have book morning, or like a
Mhm,
book's done
mhm,
and you're sad it's done. Those are the books I think are the biggest influences because when I close it, I'm like, my first instinct is like, oh, I want to write a book like this. Like that's what
mhm,
sings because I'm having this like emotional reaction. So last year I read Our Wives Under the Sea, Julia Armfield. I wrote about it in one of our classes too.
mhm, mhm.
Um, Technically, it's like borderline horror, magical realism, but just has this really beautiful spousal relationship in the middle that I found really interesting. And the story is told from two perspectives, alternating kind of timelines, and what I think would be a challenge to do. So it'd be interesting to try something like that, but is very lyrical, beautiful writing. Um, and yeah, I like cried, so that stuff sticks with me. Um, I read this one 9 years ago now, and I still think about it. Station
Mhm,
11, Emily St.
mhm.
John Mandel. If your book gets me thinking about the universe 9 years later, and I'm still thinking about these expansive humanity questions, like, That is a damn good book. Like, good for you. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess one book that most inspired me to become a writer, I'm gonna put a slight twist on this, but um, summer 2022, I read Writers and Lovers, Lily King,
Hmm.
which is a beautiful book, great characterization. But the character in the book is working on her novel. This whole thing is she's working a waitress job and she's grinding. She's getting up at 4 a.m. to write before she has to do all this work. And she's so passionate about it and so dedicated in it that like when I finished reading it, I just felt this like immense dissatisfaction. I'm like, I have let this like writing stuff go. Like I've through the pandemic, through the chaos of just life and heartbreak and these things that have happened, I wasn't prioritizing writing and I hadn't been for several years. And I just felt like grief that I hadn't. And so this is the book that I read like made me change my mind and I'm like I have to apply for the MFA. Like I have to do it. I have to
Hmm.
chase my goal. And so like it had a great influence and like had I read that, I don't know if I would have applied for the program. So,
Really?
yeah.
I yeah, I think about that a lot. Um, the book, the my answer to that question is Absalom, Absalom. When
Mhm.
anybody asks me like, what's the one book? Uh, that's not the book that inspired me to become a writer, but that's the one book that I think is just the book for me because of all the thematic things that matter to the area I'm from and all the
Mhm.
sins of the past and trying to reconcile all that. That's the book. But as far as the one that made me want to be a writer, that this could be fun, there's two. There's a collection of short stories by Barry Hannah called Long Lost Happy.
Mm.
And it's just his magnum opus. It's like everything thrown together, the best of Barry Hannah. And there's more stories than I could name on here in that book that if I get stuck, I could just go back and read them.
Mm.
And then it really made me think about craft, like how to put a sentence together. And then the one that made me understand you can write what you want to write about the people that you want to write about was Larry Brown's collection, Tiny Love. It's all his short stories. And that was like the gateway drug to Larry Brown for me because then I went and got Joe and Faye and Facing the Music and Dirty Work and On Fire and tore through all of that because what I learned was Larry Brown wasn't too far removed from my old man. He was a fireman uh, with a high school education that sat down one day and said, "Okay, I'm gonna write books. I'm just gonna write
Mhm.
books." You know, he goes and gets a typewriter and starts banging them out in his garage. And I felt like they were about me, like kind of like
Mm. Mhm.
my folks, like this area. And I guess I connected with that. And I think every writer has probably had that moment where they go, "Yep, now
Mhm.
I know." Like I feel validated. It's like the "I've been seen" moment, you
Yep.
know.
Absolutely.
So now here at my desk, I've got a picture. I got a picture on this side of Barry Hannah at Square Books, and then on the other side, which I can't get him down now because he's hung up. But I've got a picture of Larry Brown with a Budweiser on a back porch, and
Yeah.
if I ever get stuck, you can go,
Mhm.
okay, go back to these two and figure out kind of where you are. And that's so helpful, I think, because you do get stuck. And sometimes reading something out of genre will help you get unstuck
Mhm.
because you're more literary and I'm more realism.
Mhm.
So if I read something just for fun, sometimes that helps. I read Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club. Have you
Yeah.
read that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just read that just for fun. And it was fun. Like it was a good time. And then I would turn around and read like Uprising, which is a story of like labor rights in Wisconsin during Scott Walker's governorship. It's just like you just read like anything, but out of
Yeah.
all of it, you'll pull something, I think. And we've done well on our segue here because we can talk. We were talking about writers and kind of what writers do, but you live in like a super literary city.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of people forget that, or they don't know that.
Mhm.
Um, but the Twin Cities is kind of a place for writers. So, how connected is the city to literature? How's that culture in Minneapolis, St. Paul? What are the things you can do? We know because we would get emails and stuff, but I mean, there's got to be more than even we knew about up there. There's so many publishers and agents.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
know
can't
this.
I can't just go to a reading, like
Yeah, I
around here.
struggle with that.
But at least you've got the opportunity.
I do. I do have some opportunities. There's see where to begin. I think I was more aware of it because my undergrad program was also here in the Twin Cities. So I had these two incredible professors, both women, both poets, who kind of pulled us into some of it, which was great. And one of those, probably I would say the biggest resource is called the Loft.
Mhm.
So it's a literary center in downtown Minneapolis. They host readings, they host the occasional conference. Um, Milkweed, which is a publisher, like, is in the same building. Um, the closest I've ever come to Milkweed is their bookstore, but like, um, in terms of just like, it's still very competitive.
Mhm,
People
mhm,
say that to me all the time. They're like, "You're so good. Why don't you just go work in publishing?" And I'm like, "Or why don't I go to LA and try to be a model?" It's the same thing. It's hard.
mhm,
It's so
mhm.
hard
It
to
is.
do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, just because there are like those resources here too, the competition is still quite high. But we do have several great publishers. And yeah, agents in the area. But I think all of them are in some way connected to the Loft, which has its own mentorship program. It has readings. It has connections to a number of independent bookstores that do readings that I've appreciated over the years. I mean, Louise Erdrich has her own bookstore in Minneapolis called Birch Bark
Mhm,
Books. Um, that I love to shop at. And so, I mean, not everyone, I mean, she's amazing. So I'm like, well, you're cool.
mhm.
Not like I've ever run into her there, but they have like an entire wall of her books and they're all signed. And I'm like, you're cool. Um,
You can hold out hope.
yeah, that would be neat. Um,
I go to Square Books all the time just hoping John Grisham walks in,
yeah,
you know,
totally. Totally.
knowing that he lives in Virginia,
Uh-huh.
but still, uh, it is
Okay.
it's far more connected than what I thought it was.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we learned that in the program. We started talking about agents and getting published, and that is kind of a good segue into that because that's the part that I think people outside of writing don't understand. There's two ways you can get published. You can get published at an independent press where you don't need an agent most of the time, or you have to go through Dante's level of hell, which is getting an agent. Um, you want to talk about that for a minute because I've got thoughts. How's that been for you? Are you trying? Have you gave it a shot? Like, where are you at with the agent train?
I have not jumped on the agent train yet. My goal is to do so once I finish my current work in progress. Um, it's like knowing you have a marathon coming you haven't trained for. Like, it's kind of this
Hmm.
awful, daunting feeling. They explain to friends and family, and they're like, "They'd be crazy not to take your book." I'm like, "Okay, thanks, grandma, but that's not helpful." Um,
Yeah.
but um, it's daunting. I think I'm getting my first taste of it in just submitting to literary magazines.
Hmm.
Um, again, rejection is something I think I have an okay handle on. I'm not the best at processing it, but I'm not brand new to it either in terms of writing. So there was some knowing I went into it, but really until this last 6 months, I wasn't no, a little more than that, but about that. I haven't submitted my work out there. I was too scared. It took this like boost, I think, of the MFA to like get me to really push the duckling into the world. So getting a taste of that, but I am very much not looking forward to experiencing yeah, the agent train. I'm in book Twitter and I see it, and so it's probably worse, but trying to make some connections, trying to learn, trying to network a little bit, and so I'm on writing Twitter, and it's painful to watch.
Well,
Again, yeah,
writing Twitter's painful anyway.
it is.
Bec we talked Colin and I talked about this last week. It let me try to offend everybody. Um,
Mhm.
you don't have to spend a lot of time on writing Twitter to find the real writers
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people on writing Twitter are not going to use that term. They're in their feelings
Mm.
and they're sitting down and they're just banging something out on paper and they're like, oh, writing's so hard, like write bleed on the page. um, they never submit anything, you never see any celebrations or them getting published. It's just like this is their place to bitch about something, and I don't think that that's really what it's for. I think if you're doing good work, the people on writing Twitter are going to know you're doing good work. They're going to read
Mm.
your stuff wherever it is online, and then when you publish something, they're going to celebrate the hell out of it.
Mhm.
My problem is the people that, you know, they've got like 100 posts and they're all about the how bad writing is. You know, like
Mhm.
I hate writing, but writer's life, hashtag writer's life. Um, are there parts of it that suck? Yeah, it's solitary. And a lot of
Mhm.
the time you're alone with your thoughts trying to figure something out, and you go to dark places and you've got to turn that into something. And I think that's what a true writer does. I think otherwise, I'm probably going to offend a lot of people here. The comments will probably fill up. I think otherwise you're just keeping a diary. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're not doing the work and putting it out there, and like you said, not afraid to get it kicked back at you with some criticism, then I don't know that you can call yourself a writer. I think everybody needs to experience that pain to know kind of what it is. And I totally get what you said. Like the first thing I sent out boomeranged. You know, you send it out there and it comes back, and then you write something that you think's brilliant and it boomerangs too. Um, and I think that's the worst part about agents, because they don't know you.
Mhm.
And they're going to be the one selling you to everybody else. And you're coming at them with a paragraph trying to sum up 250 or 300 pages. And if you've never tried to do, you and I can speak from experience, and I know a lot of people listening to this can too. If you've never tried to do that, that's the hardest damn thing you'll do in your
Mhm.
MFA, is sum your book up, not only in a paragraph, but then we had to break it down into like 5 sentences, and then you had to break it down into a sentence. I can't turn my book into one sentence. I still can't very well.
Mhm.
Uh, have you got a one sentence for yours? Did you ever get one?
I mean, I completed the assignment, so I got one somewhere, but I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
But I'm not saying, is it the one you stuck with, right?
I
Um,
haven't yeah, I haven't recircled back to those things just 'cause I haven't I'm still working on finishing the
yeah.
novel, so that's kind of when where my energy is going, and then submitting other poetry and flash and things like that. So I
The
will definitely need to redo a lot
mhm.
of these. I mean, by the time I finish, like my comps are going to be out of date, and all these things. So they'll be back to the drawing board in some way. But at least I am not starting from zero, because I get very intimidated by things like that. Um,
It is.
I'm grateful the program made us write at least one query letter and some of these pieces that we have, because I wouldn't I don't know, I think I would have gone into hibernation before I did it on my own. Like I
Yeah.
just it's so intimidating.
And and then you turn it into, your query letter goes through so many iterations of what it is.
Hmm.
I've changed mine 2 or 3 times because some people ask for different things. They'll say submit a query highlighting the themes. Some people want a synopsis. Some people want, just straight tell me everything, an
Hmm.
abstract. And then when you marry the 3 together, you get something quirky that,
Hmm.
I mean, I got lucky, it caught a couple eyes, but nobody ever took it.
Yeah.
I got, so the week that it got accepted, I had 5 other rejections, um, that were just, we see where you're going, but it's not for us, or,
Hmm.
um, it's just, we like it, but it's not a good fit. And that's kind of what Sheldon and I were talking about, because I read a really terrifying article today. I don't know if, did you see it, about the CEO of Penguin
No.
saying that they're going to lean more on AI in the future? I mean, I think I retweeted it. Actually, I wrote some shitty poem about it and put it put it above it. But you can,
Oh.
it's terrifying, because what I think we're killing art. I think we're
Mhm.
definitely killing the humanities, like one nail at a time. I saw it happen with history, and I don't want it to happen with writing, because it's easy to ape something.
Yeah.
because we all do it. We all steal, and we're taught to steal in
Mhm.
school. But AI is going to steal from everybody, and I don't know that that's art. I think if humans steal, they still have to make it valid for more or less. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Absolutely.
But the computer's just tossing stuff out there. So yeah, you should look that up and read that. I think it'll keep you up tonight.
Ugh,
It's
okay, great.
a yeah, I always feel like we got into things like 20 years too late, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I feel that.
it's unfortunately it's one of those things where you have to say it is what it is. But one thing that we do have that other people didn't have is you can self-publish your stuff if you wanted
Mhm.
to, or you could start your own imprint if you wanted to. And I know one of our classmates has done that and
Mhm.
seems to be having success with it. So you, that's good because I think if the more people do that, then I think it takes some of their power away because the big five are running the show. And I don't know that that's where the creativity is. I think the creativity is in smaller presses that are still willing to develop somebody and
Yeah.
let them take a risk, you know. But
Yeah. Yeah, I tend
let's,
to agree with you. It's bleak.
yeah, 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 it is that. Well, let's talk about happy things because
Okay.
we will celebrate your success, my good friend.
Oh,
So you had a
thank you.
poem,
Mhm.
published, and I read it, and it's beautiful, and it's deep, and it is affecting, and it is profound. Um, and
Thank
I'm
you.
not going to spoil it. Everybody can go look that up at West Trestle Review and read that. It's called "Let Your Hair Down." You want to tell us about the poem a little bit and how you crafted it? You don't have to go
Sure.
too deep if you don't want to because the subject matter, but I'll let you talk as much as you're comfortable talking about it.
Sure. No, I'm pretty comfortable. I had some few people come up to me and like, "Oh, I don't have to share this with anybody if you don't." I'm like, "I put it on the internet, like quite literally. Like I had other people put it on the internet for me.
Mhm.
Like I'm fine with it." But yeah, trigger warning, content warning. It does deal with endometriosis and just and kind of chronic pain and those things. But yeah, let down your hair is um
I've typed it in wrong. I've
no,
got it
that's
right here.
okay.
Look at this, Kaleigh. Look how stupid I am. It literally, I don't know if you can see it. It says, "Let down your hair," and I've typed "Let your hair down."
That's okay. Totally fine.
I'm gonna fix
Um
it.
yeah, so let down your hair is it's probably one of the most unique experiences I've had in terms of writing poetry, very abnormal to what I just shared with you of how my process. I had the idea to just kind of write about my endometriosis journey, and I started writing, scribbling some things down in a journal, which I never do. I usually process right to the computer, um, and it just like flowed out of me. Um, Pretty raw, like pretty complete. Like in sections, but like it was just like these whole chunks, and I was like, "Wow." So I was really energized by it and put it up on, screen and wrote everything up and did some rearranging, a little bit of editing, but, like, it was pretty much done. It's the fastest I've ever written a poem. I did
Did
have one of
you?
our classmates read it, and I was grateful for, like, a little bit of feedback just to make sure I wasn't,
Yeah,
like 'cause I was like, "This is brilliant. Am I crazy?" And she's like, "No, it's great." I was like, "Okay, cool."
you had an exorcism writing experience.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, absolutely, which tends
Yeah.
to be more with yeah, poetry, but this one was much faster and even, like, more
Mhm.
intense than usual, and I think it was just 'cause, like, these emotions had built up, um, and yeah, so it came flowing out and, yeah, it is definitely autobiographical and personal, but also kind of just on behalf of all women who have had and especially those who have endometriosis, but those who don't feel in control of kind of what's happening in their body. And I was definitely in that place when I wrote it of just grieving that I can't fix myself. No amount of medication or care will be able to fix this. Um, and so that like lament and that frustration and anger is kind of the root and or the seed, I guess, that grew the poem. So um, that's what it's about. It's pretty
Did you? How many places did you send it to before it got accepted?
3 or 4. Um,
It's pretty good.
yeah. I was holding on to it.
Yeah,
I knew it was something, and so I wasn't
yeah,
sending it to everybody. Um, yeah, I was trying to get a few other things out there to like make
Hmm.
myself feel more appealing and
Yeah.
draw
But
them in with my bio and yeah.
that's a thing too, because you write something and you think, "Oh, this is good.
Mhm.
This is good." And then you wanna send it to a big one, which might take, 6 to 8 months to get published. And then you're like, "Damn it, I just want somebody to read it," so you can take your chances with a smaller one and get it out there. So I wondered, I'm like, "Okay, how long did she sit on this? Because this is really, really good." So that's interesting. 3 or 4, that's not bad, because everybody knows, heck, a lot of them get knocked back 10, 12 times before you ever get one out there. So,
Oh yeah.
no, I saw that pop up, and because we've got the Slack, and we get things popped in there from our
Mhm.
classmates and stuff all the time. So anytime anybody gets anything published, I'm like, yes, like
Uh-huh.
we've done a thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So you've got that out there. You're over at Poverty House now,
Mhm.
which unexpectedly, out of the blue, I'm sitting there one day and I'm scrolling through here, and it's like, here's one from Kaleigh Walter. And I went, shut up. So, so when did you
Yep.
come into the house?
Very recently, like a week ago, week and a half
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sheldon invited me in and I was, of course said yes. I felt very honored to have a space to kind of throw some things
Mhm.
out into the universe. That means something. I mean, if blogging is your thing or like you want to put things on Instagram, I totally applaud that. Um, but it does disqualify for any other like lit magazine, right? Like if it usually is like printed somewhere, like that's it. That's where it lives
Mm,
forever. And
mm.
so I
I
love
usually,
that this had
yeah.
like it has meat to it and it has community to
Mhm.
it and there's networking to it. And so I was like, this is gonna be really neat. So yeah.
There are some things that I write that are specifically geared there, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I've almost got it to the point now to where I'll write a Poverty House piece and not submit it anywhere else, that I know that it's going there. Because I just think it's a cool thing. There's so many talented people there doing so many
Hmm.
different things. It's nice to kind of have it all in the same place. Sheldon and I said, it was the lit hub for cool kids. That's kind of what it feels like. It's just, you can go there and get anything. From a
Hmm.
poem to a podcast to a music review to a short story. I think he's even got novel excerpts up there now.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's a fun little adventure to be on, and I'm glad it's there, and glad you're there and the other people that are there, because the work I've seen so far has been pretty outstanding. So
Hmm.
yours, you put up the other day about the motorcycle. I really
Hmm.
enjoyed that one too. Like,
Thank you.
um, it's just really, really surprising, some of the stuff that you read people's other stuff, and then they stick stuff up there and you go, wow, like that's pretty impressive. Um, JD Clapp, who was on here last week, um, or he's going, well, I'm recording all these in advance, so JD will be up, he'll be episode 3. But we talked about his Hemingway influence, and I think the stuff that he's done on there, you can really see that. So let's talk about Hulda. Or
Sure.
not talk about Hulda. Give me, where are you? You don't have to tell anybody anything about the plot, but
Okay.
I'm emotionally invested in this story, and
I
I'm just
know.
kind of wondering where we're at.
So yes, Dan is kindly talking about my work in progress. My first if I complete it, it will be my first novel. Technically,
Yeah.
I've got like 90,000 words of like a portal fantasy like that I worked on for the last decade that I will probably never finish, but
Yeah.
it was a lot of time and effort
Mhm.
into that 90,000 words that isn't done yet, but it's there technically. So this is my first real ditch effort, I guess, at finishing a novel and what I hope to gosh, I hope to do something with it. But I wrote my best estimation is about 50% during the
Mhm.
program.
Mhm.
It was 47,000 words. I hold that loosely just because I don't exactly know how long it's going to take me to write things. People ask me that all the time. Like, and yes, I marked it or I outlined it. We had to as an assignment, but that was 2 years ago. I'm deviating from my plot as my characters have developed and things, evolve over time. So, yeah. Uh, and took about a month off. And I said, if I take any more time, I'm never going to come back. So
Yeah.
early January, I was like, okay, let's get back on this. So I've been writing a little bit. Need to light more of a fire, I think. But I've written another chapter, is another 21 pages. I'm taking the win in the last 2.5 weeks. So and I'm having fun getting back into things. And the goal
Did
is to have it finished by this year, but we'll see how that goes.
did you have to reread it after the break?
Mm-mm.
See, on my second one, I got to the last chapter and then the tornado cracked us. So
Yeah.
I only have 25, 30 pages left. Like I've climaxed, like I'm done.
Hmm.
And I've got to the point now to where I've been out of the story so long, I'm having to go back and reread my own book to be able to finish it. But without giving anything away, your book is a nice mixture of, I think, a lot of styles. You've got the coming of age aspect of it.
Hmm.
You've got an almost travel logishness to it as
Hmm.
well. You've got a very messed up family situation. And then you have this magical realism to it too.
Hmm.
So the ability to do that and have it work was what I found pretty intriguing about that book, because the way that you've done it is you've kind of made the magical realism like a neuroses in your character. Now it may change, but
Hmm.
and that I think makes her a deeper character, you know, and it also is like lurking over the book.
Hmm.
So that's the part of it I enjoyed. So I'm rooting for you to finish, and I want to read it when you get it done because I feel like I've got to know what's going to go on.
Hey, you're welcome to read the first half right now. That thesis, first half is done.
Yeah.
Few people have read that whole thing just because of the
Mhm,
way the program was. So
mhm.
I don't know. You say I'm doing well, but I'm like, I don't know. Am I landing the plane? Like, how's this worked? We'll find out. But
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing because you feel it's one of those things where you feel like you're landing it, but then you're like, "Am I tilting?
hmm,
Am I on the slide?" But I think
yeah,
it's going. The last
we'll
time I
see.
read it, I think it was going in the right direction. But you,
No, thank you. It's yeah, I can share a teeny bit more about it. I should practice talking about it, I suppose. But one of our professors, I think, gave me the right terminology around it, and then it's upmarket fiction.
hmm
I've also seen Smart Book Club around, and that fits what I think, at least, that the book is. It started. You didn't ask me this question, but kind of funny.
go
The
ahead.
seed that would become the book actually began on the setting. The very first thing I ever decided I want to write about was like I'm going to write a book that takes place in Paris because I love Paris. It's kind of my favorite place, and like that was the first thing, was the setting, which is very funny because it's a very plot driven book as well.
hmm
And from there I was like, well, what about Paris and what about this, and kind of dreamed up this character who's in this situation that no one would enjoy being in, and that she finds out that she is going to die in 60 some days, and not from illness, because that's a whole entirely different book and a different conversation, a different story, but some outside forces, the magical realism that you mentioned. um, and the whole book is basically, does she believe it, and what will she, if and when she believes it. um, but one of the things that has surprised me as I've written it is the relationships that have arisen. And I think more
hmm
so, because it is a very solitary book. She's very alone and struggling through her own writing and her own dreams, and how those dreams have changed and, didn't pan out the way she wanted. And that's what I thought like a lot of the theme was. And it still is, it's there. But this like pull that I'm getting as I'm writing it is actually toward these women in her life. So now I'm starting to think of it as a love story, but not a romance story. It's about these
hmm
relationships that she has between herself, her mother, her sister, and her best friend, because
hmm
they're all tied into this kind of crazy magic with her, and their
Yeah.
fate's kind of with her fate. And so that's been actually really fun to explore, like the relationships between women, and um, the love you have for family, and then chosen family and those closest friends. And so we'll see. I'm kind of exploring that as we go.
Well, you you write her so well. You were talking about the movie in your head thing.
Mhm.
You did that to me with the scene where she's I think it's where her mom zooms her and she's like physically dirty and I think hungover and I could just like picture her like with her face and some cereal, like just sit there, like because you just like her hair was dirty and she's just like I thought I feel this woman right now, like
Mhm.
I can see, but that's that's kind of how affecting the story is because at that point in the story, that's where she was.
Mhm.
She was low. So it's going to be interesting to see how you do that and turn all that into a story because I am interested with what you do with all those women in the story,
Mhm.
and how you tie up all those loose ends because I think you got something. I think it's something like you said that's up market and it probably lends itself to a book club, like you said,
Mhm.
because I think you've got so much going on. I think it lends itself to discussion. So good luck with that. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So you're to the biggie now.
Okay.
I don't know if you've thought about it, but I've kept you about an hour, so we have to go with our last question here. So any writer, living or dead, you can invite three. Who are you going
Okay.
to invite, and what are you going to serve for dinner?
Is it one item that I'm serving? Like one dish for
It's
everybody, or do they get individual ones?
maybe I went too southern. When I say what are you having for dinner, we give the whole menu. So just whatever,
Okay.
whatever.
That's
Um,
fair. Let's see. We'll do some funny and some serious in here because why not?
okay.
Life is fun. Um,
Well, you want it to be a good party.
yeah, yeah. So first, I'll invite Abby Norman.
Hmm.
She wrote a memoir, "Ask Me About My Uterus: A Quest to Make Doctors Believe in Women's Pain." I actually read her book for our creative nonfiction class, and did
Hmm.
my paper on her. She's a science writer, and she just does this unbelievable deep dive into like the history of women's pain, why women tend to be not as believed, and then very much into her own endometriosis journey. And so she's just super brave, and I would love to feed her, I don't know, chocolate and tea and things as a thank you for being so brave. Um, I would invite my author crush because I don't know, silly. Um, Pierce Brown, he's a fantasy science fiction writer, the Red Rising series. Yeah,
Hmm.
he's been my author crush for like 9 years now. So would love to have dinner with him. One on one would be fine. Um, but he writes really compelling books, and his process is super interesting. I've heard him speak at just a couple author events. Um, and this might be fascinating to you as an exorcism writer. He very detailed, very complex fantasy science fiction. He doesn't outline.
Oh,
Um,
neither do I. Other than just a few notes.
yeah, he doesn't outline, but he's got like a bajillion characters, like intense world building. And he writes, I
Mhm.
guess, like chunks at a time. And he keeps working that chunk, like, 9 chapters, he says about that. He keeps
Mhm.
working multiple POVs, like he keeps working it until it's right, and then he moves on. Like that is
Um,
fascinating, actually. So he
that's
also
that's
is an interesting dude to listen to.
that's Pope level exorcism there. My
I
God.
know, I know. Yeah, and don't worry, I brought my brother-in-law to his reading, and he's like, "Oh, he's a lot more charming and, like, gregarious from what I
Yeah.
was expecting from a science fiction writer." And I'm like, "Don't let them all fool you." Um, yeah, and the last one, I'll bring Lily King, mentioned her earlier, as a
Mhm.
thank you for just helping inspire this latest chapter of my life. So we'll serve chocolate cake and tacos, because why not?
Chocolate cake and tacos. Then you can serve those. What are they? The little desserts, the chacos, the
Yeah.
little waffle cones that are dipped in chocolate with the ice cream in them. You could go full chocolate tacos.
Mhm.
I'm down with that.
I would love that. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, we can find you on Twitter at Kaleigh Walter. You got lucky. You got to get your name.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
mine, I mean, I got lucky too, but I had to stick the MFA on the end of it to get my name. But I've been a lot of things on Twitter over the years and only got lucky with that at the end. If it wouldn't have
Yeah.
been for that, I would be like Dan dot underscore 1174, or something crazy. So,
That is
where else can we find you? Do you have a Substack or anything like that? Or are we just the best place to get you on Twitter and Instagram?
best place is Twitter. I do have an Instagram too. That's more just my life things, but,
Mhm.
I am working on a website. Um, so I do have a domain name. It's just kaleywalter.com. I've been
Okay.
paying that domain name for like almost a decade because I don't want to lose it. So it's just my name, and I'm like, I'm paying for it, even though there's nothing on the site right now. But
Yeah.
that's another goal for the first half of this year is just getting a working website, just so I can start
It's like
sharing links
it's
to
like
pieces and things like that.
it's like my Peacock subscription. Like I keep paying it, and I don't even know. Like I just keep paying it every month. But at least yours has got some, gravitas to it. At least you can use it one day.
That's the
Uh,
hope. I'm like,
yeah.
someday this will be worth it if I actually have a
On
website.
on Wix at one time, I had like Dan Russell Wrights or something.
Mhm.
I didn't. I've got like one of the most common names in the world, so it's not easy to get like Dan Russell. It's like being named John Smith.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so we'll look for that to go live. We can find you at the Poverty House. You can find Let Down Your Hair at West Trestle Review,
Mhm.
and you post pretty regularly on your Twitter anytime something happens. So if you're interested in Kaleigh Walter, that's where you can find her. That and
Thanks
then
so much.
St. Paul.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be
You
here.
still
I'll be here.
Is that your end of the line, St. Paul? Or are you going anywhere else, or is that home?
Well, technically Minneapolis. I don't mind, but it's a big deal here. There's a rivalry between the two cities.
I don't know these things.
um, yeah, no, my family's from here, so I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm pretty fond of the place. So,
So just for us, because
mhm.
nobody else may get this, the best Juicy Lucy in town, where is it?
I mean, there's the great debate, isn't it?
Hmm.
I guess my favorite is Blue Door, but I know that's not the originals. I think Blue Door also has like a Juicy Lucy with either peanut butter and stuff and jam. Like
Yeah.
it's very
Some of them are more
interesting.
creative.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Um, I went downtown by the arena around the corner. There's a bar there. Um, right by where the Wild play, and I'm blanking on the bar right now.
Okay.
You turn
Um,
left. Um, I had a brilliant one there.
okay.
I had a brilliant one there. But I'd probably go with Matt's if you had to pick between the
Yeah.
other two. Um, I just didn't have a good experience at the other one. I didn't have enough juicy in my Lucy.
Okay.
There was no cheese. It was just empty.
The 508, right? Or
And yeah, something
yeah.
the number
Yeah.
one.
I always forget. I know where it's
Yeah, I
located.
do
Like I could
too.
drive us there, but
I always want to call it like the 1910 Club or something. Yeah. Aren't we terrible people to not be able to remember these institutions?
I know.
But
Gosh. Well, at
yeah,
least you don't live here. I do. So now I gotta
yeah. Well,
watch for it.
that's true. When I
But
go, I make it a point. Make it a
yeah.
point to go there.
Well, there's
Um,
actually little plug, Minneapolis, St. Paul, a lot of really, really good food and cuisine because there's some great chefs that are located here.
Surprisingly so. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
surprisingly so.
Yeah.
I work with a guy that told me to go to. I'm gonna get the restaurant wrong, but the sous chef. It's
Yeah.
not.
Owami.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we could never get in, but I want to go
Mhm.
there next time I'm up there. I think
Yeah.
that'd
I
be
think
really cool.
I made a reservation like 2 months in advance to eat there, but it
Well,
was
there
it
you
was
go.
neat. Hmm.
Well, I'll do.
So
So you've eaten there, so it is good.
yeah, it is
Yeah,
very good. So yeah, all um, native
yeah.
based, so native chef. But then all the food that they serve and all the ingredients in that food is all native to this specific land in
Hmm.
Minnesota and what was originally here. So it's naturally like gluten free and dairy free because of that as well.
Yeah.
So a little more accessible, tons of vegetarian options. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, next time I'm in town, we will all get together and maybe we'll plan that out so we can get in.
that would be great.
Because that'd be a good time.
Happy to
Thanks.
take you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaleigh, for coming on. I appreciate it. You're a wonderful writer and a wonderful friend. So I'm glad
Oh,
I get
thank
to
you.
share your story with everybody else. It
Oh,
deserves to
thank
be out
you.
there.
It's an
Yes,
honor to
ma'am.
be it's an honor to be here. So thank you. This is my first podcast. It's my first podcast. So
Hey, when I did the first one, it was my first one too. It was, hey, let's fly by the seat of
mhm,
our pants and see what happens.
love
So
that.
I'm glad people like it, and I'm happy to have folks on that deserve to be on. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Kaylee, have a good evening.
Thanks. You too.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye bye.